The war room aboard the Yamato smelled of salt, oil, and stale cigarette smoke. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood near the plotting table, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the miniature fleet markers spread across the Pacific chart. Around him, junior officers moved quietly, updating positions, relaying coded messages from distant carriers. The air hummed with controlled efficiency. It was June 4, 1942. The largest naval operation Japan had ever mounted was now in motion. Yamamoto did not smile. He rarely did anymore. 6 months earlier, Pearl Harbor had been a triumph. The American Pacific Fleet crippled in a single morning. Tokyo had celebrated. The Emperor had praised him. But Yamamoto had not celebrated. He had stood in a similar room, looking at a similar map, and felt only the cold certainty of what came next. America will not forgive this, he had told his staff then. We have 6 months. Maybe 8. After that, their industry will wake up. And when it does, we will drown in steel. No one had believed him. Now, Midway was the answer. A decisive battle. Lure the remaining American carriers into open water. Destroy them. Force a negotiated peace before the industrial machine across the ocean began to turn in earnest. It had to work. Yamamoto looked down at the chart. For Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, steaming northeast toward Midway Atoll. The finest carrier strike force in the world. Veterans of Pearl Harbor, Darwin, Ceylon. Undefeated. Behind them, his own battleship group. Further north, a diversionary force heading toward the Aleutians. Over 200 ships. Thousands of men. All moving according to plan. A young communications officer approached, bowing slightly. Admiral, latest report from Admiral Nagumo. First strike wave launched against Midway Island. No enemy carriers detected. Yamamoto nodded. Acknowledged. The officer hesitated. Sir, should we? That will be all. The officer bowed again and withdrew. Yamamoto returned his gaze to the map. His fingers traced the empty blue space east of Midway. Somewhere out there, the Americans were waiting. Or they weren't. Intelligence said they were still at Pearl Harbor. Reconnaissance said the same. But Yamamoto had spent years in America. He had studied at Harvard. He had walked the streets of Washington. He knew the American character, pragmatic, resourceful, stubborn. They did not give up. They adapted. And they had broken Japanese codes before. He pushed the thought away. The plan was sound. Nagumo was experienced. The carriers were invincible. Still, doubt lingered. Not in the plan. Not in the men. But in the arithmetic. Japan had 6 fleet carriers. America, before Pearl Harbor, had 7. 3 had been sunk or damaged. But America could build more. Japan could not. Not at the same pace. Not with the same resources. This was not a war Japan could win by attrition. It had to be won now. At Midway. Or not at all. Yamamoto straightened. He glanced at the clock on the bulkhead. 0700 hours. Nagumo's strike would be hitting Midway soon. Then the second wave. Then, if the Americans appeared, the carriers would pivot, rearm, and annihilate them. Simple. Efficient. Decisive. He allowed himself a slow exhale. Around him, the war room continued its quiet rhythm. Officers spoke in low tones. Radios crackled. The fleet moved forward. But in the silence between transmissions, Yamamoto heard something else. A question he could not answer. What if we were already too late? Admiral Chuchi Nagumo stood on the bridge of the Akagi, binoculars raised, scanning the horizon. The sea was calm. The sky, clear. Perfect carrier weather. Behind him, the flight deck thrummed with activity. Mechanics swarmed over returning bombers. Pilots climbed down from cockpits, faces streaked with sweat and smoke. The first strike on Midway had been successful, runways cratered, installations burning. But the island's defenses had been stronger than expected. A second strike would be needed. Nagumo lowered the binoculars. His jaw tightened. He was not a carrier admiral by training. He was a torpedo expert. A surface warfare officer. He had been given command of the Kido Butai, the carrier strike force, because of seniority, not expertise. And he knew it. 6 months of victories had not erased that knowledge. Admiral, his air operations officer approached, clipboard in hand. Recommendation from Commander Genda. Rearm the reserve strike force with land attack ordnance for a second wave against Midway. Nagumo nodded slowly. The reserve planes, currently armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs for anti-ship operations, would need to be reconfigured. It would take time. But Midway had to be neutralized. Proceed. The officer saluted and turned away. Nagumo returned his gaze to the horizon. East. Where the American carriers were supposed to be. Except they weren't. Reconnaissance had found nothing. No carriers. No task forces. Just empty ocean. Yamamoto's plan depended on the Americans taking the bait. Rushing to defend Midway. Exposing themselves. But what if they didn't come? What if intelligence was wrong? What if? Admiral. Urgent report. A radio operator burst onto the bridge, message slip trembling in his hand. Nagumo turned sharply. What is it? Scout plane from Tone, sir. Reports citing enemy surface ships. Bearing 010 degrees, distance 240 miles. The bridge fell silent. Nagumo's heart kicked once, hard. Composition? The operator glanced at the message. Unknown, sir. The pilot reports, 10 ships. Possibly more. Course and speed uncertain. Carriers? He does not say, sir. Nagumo stared at the young man. The operator stared back, pale. 10 ships. It could be anything. A cruiser group. Destroyers. A supply convoy. Or it could be carriers. Nagumo's mind raced. If there were American carriers out there, he needed to strike immediately. But his reserve planes were being rearmed with the wrong ordnance. Torpedoes were being removed. Bombs were being swapped. The hangars below deck were chaos, fuel lines open, munitions scattered, mechanics working frantically. If he ordered them to stop now, to rearm again with anti-ship weapons, it would take another hour. Maybe more. And if the Americans launched first? Send an urgent message to the scout plane, Nagumo said, voice tight. Ascertain ship types. Repeat, ascertain ship types. Especially presence of carriers. Yes, sir. The operator ran. Nagumo turned to his staff. Every face was tense. Waiting. Continue rearming for the second Midway strike, he said. But prepare to reverse course if carriers are confirmed. No one moved. Now. The bridge exploded into motion. Orders were shouted. Runners sprinted below. The organized rhythm of the morning dissolved into something faster, sharper. Nagumo gripped the railing. His knuckles whitened. Ascertain ship types. Such a simple request. But the scout plane was alone, hundreds of miles away, flying over enemy-controlled waters. Radio communication was sporadic. The pilot might not get close enough. He might be shot down. He might. The radio operator returned. Admiral, reply from the scout plane. Nagumo spun. And? The operator's voice cracked. He reports, enemy ships are accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. The world stopped. Nagumo did not breathe. A carrier. Not at Pearl Harbor. Here. Now. Waiting. The first bomb hit the Akagi at 1026 hours. Nagumo did not see it coming. One moment, he was standing on the bridge, watching his flight deck prepare for launch. Planes lined up. Engines roaring. Pilots waiting for the signal. The next moment, the sky screamed. American dive bombers, SBD Dauntless, plunging nearly vertical through broken cloud cover. No warning. No time to maneuver. The first bomb struck the flight deck amidships. It punched through steel and detonated in the upper hangar. Planes packed with fuel and ordnance, torpedoes, bombs, ammunition, ignited instantly. The explosion tore through the Akagi like a living thing. Nagumo staggered. The deck lurched beneath him. Fire erupted from below, black smoke boiling upward. Men screamed. Alarms shrieked. Another bomb hit aft. Then another. Around him, officers shouted orders that no one could hear. Through the smoke, Nagumo saw the Kaga. Burning. 3 bombs. 4. The flight deck collapsing inward. Planes tumbling into the sea. Beyond her, the Soryu. Also burning. Also dying. 3 carriers. In 5 minutes. Nagumo gripped the railing. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. This was not possible. The Kido Butai did not lose. It had never lost. Pearl Harbor. Darwin. Ceylon. Undefeated. Unstoppable. But now it was burning. Admiral, we must abandon ship. His chief of staff grabbed his arm. The fires are out of control. Nagumo did not move. He stared at the flames consuming his flagship. The ship he had commanded for 6 months. The ship that had carried him across the Pacific in triumph. Now a furnace. Admiral, please. Hands pulled him away. Down ladders. Through smoke. Onto a smaller vessel. He did not resist. He did not speak. He watched the Akagi burn. Hours later, aboard a cruiser, Nagumo sat alone in a borrowed cabin. His uniform was scorched. His face, blackened with soot. His hands, steady. A junior officer entered, bowing. Admiral, final reports. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu lost. Hiryu launched a counterstrike and hit the American carrier Yorktown. But Hiryu has also been located by enemy aircraft. She is heavily damaged. Burning. Nagumo said nothing. The officer hesitated. Admiral Yamamoto requests your assessment. Nagumo looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow. Tell Admiral Yamamoto. His voice was quiet. Flat. Tell him the Kido Butai no longer exists. The officer's face went pale. Sir, 4 carriers. Gone. In 1 day. Nagumo's gaze drifted to the porthole. Outside, the ocean was dark. Empty. We came here to destroy them. Instead, they were waiting. They knew. He paused. They knew everything. The officer bowed and left. Nagumo sat in silence. He thought of Yamamoto's words. 6 months. Maybe 8. It had been exactly 6 months since Pearl Harbor. And now, the arithmetic had changed. Japan had entered this war with 6 fleet carriers. Now it had 2. America had started with 7. They had lost 1 today, maybe. But America could build more. 10. 20. 50. Japan could not. The war would not be won at Midway. It had been lost there. Nagumo closed his eyes. He saw the Akagi burning. He saw the dive bombers falling from the sky like judgment. He saw the faces of the pilots who would never return. And he understood. This was not the beginning of victory. It was the end of certainty. Somewhere across the dark Pacific, American shipyards were already working. Welding steel. Laying keels. building the fleet that would come. And Japan had nothing left to stop it. Nagumo exhaled slowly. The war was over. It would just take 3 more years for everyone else to realize it.